God, it's perfect. Good decision. I can't quite do it. Meaning, once or twice over the last 2 or 3 years, you see, the whole, this thing that's called the left, it's just become so utterly one-dimensional. They bleat. But one notes 3 or 4 years ago, you have the actual centrist bourgeois, Jonathan Pie, becomes their kind of cheerleader with his act. But even him, and his act is engaging, but they cannot think. 2.6 trillion public debt. We're now about to go into 9 months of, but we have to have much more money for social care. We have to have much more money for childcare, despite the fantastic book by, what's-his-face, Affluenza, stating the science says if you farm your child out prior to the age of about 7, without doing it so carefully like the Scandinavians actually require the parents to be part of a community when putting a younger child into childcare and be there a lot of the time, gently getting the child used to the new village. No, we're going to have 9 months of, we've got to have 30 hours a week free childcare so they can go and buy more bling and they can have more expensive lives and not bother turning the heating down. I'm a fucking old goat and I haven't had heating for ever, even when ill. And then, yes, it's all going to be about, social care. It's never been viable. It doesn't make sense. It's the true manifestation. Oh, yeah, that's the word. Yeah, we want to manifest a world where there's so much more money for social care. So fat fucking carers can prance around in their cars. They're all expensive. They've all got new signage and new paintwork. And they'll moan, but we only have 15 minutes. But it's not viable. It's simply not viable. It's never been viable. And somehow having society arranged such that the younger, terribly atomized effete lot, as I was, get the message. No. Somehow you're going to find a way. You're going to have to find a way, and it should be actually practical. It should be by payment, actually, initially. You're going to have to be... Most of Europe does not farm out their atomized old people for 20, 30 years to the state, which it's never been viable. And anyway, the low-paid poor people who work, the heroes who work in that world, they so rarely, particularly in 2020-21, you look at Illicit Girls Blogspot, bloody whatnot.com, or the 1943, is it, Wuthering Heights, Kathy's there on her deathbed, she's expiring of whatever she's expiring, and they say, well, let's try, put her outside into the sunshine, that might bring her back to life. No, these fat people who are in charge of mainly fat people, who are in charge of the old people, caring for them, they so rarely will even take them out into the daylight. Get some UV, even a day like today, you get a bit of UV. Nope. Anyway, that's all blah, blah, blah. But it's your Jonathan Pies, all of this thing It's not the left. If you care about people, you will actually say, this is never. If you're every single 60, 50-year and older person in Britain, particularly the women, because actually we have a very sexist culture still, although we have various kinds of weird kinds of sexism, no man would ever be allowed to publish Rachel Kushner's book, The Mars Room, as I was telling the bookseller here, and she got it, and not here, in town earlier. What was I doing? Blah, 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 blah. Mars Room. Back into... Yes. Every middle-aged, well, almost all middle-aged people who are, well, actually not almost all, because so many. You see, poor immigrants coming over here, they're not estranged from their families. There's 5 million. I lived in a number one, sweet, super happy, we have such a wholesome life place by Titley in the Hills. An old man, a 63-year-old man, died alone in a bungalow not far. We popped into there about 8 years ago. We popped in shortly after he died. There were mounds of beer cans. He was actually all right. I met him a few times and chatted with him. He was a local man in rural Herefordshire. They couldn't even find... He'd been living there for 3 or 4 years. They couldn't even find out. The police, the local authority, couldn't even find out who his family members were to tell them he died alone. A year later, it transpires by some fluke, somebody had mentioned something to somebody, and he was a local family who had 4 or 5 family members, lifelong, only 7 or 8 miles away. We are so atomized in this fucking awful country, and there are millions and millions who this applies to. These poor immigrants coming here, most of them have their family links in some way or another, and they're going to more or less look after each other, or at least tell each other good jokes, tell the old bugger good jokes when they're on their when they've got their fucking catheter in or whatever. It's unviable. But we're going to have 9 months prior to the next election from well, they're not the left, because this does not help people. Yes, as I was saying, the 50-year-old issues, if they're still in touch with their family, and there was about 50% of them, they spend their whole life figuring